Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So, another video for the G11P, and this time, sensors. We got a whole bunch of them, we got a whole bunch of receivers that they'll work with. So, I'll bring you in for a close-up look, show you how we configure these things. So, let's crack on. So, first off, we have a bunch of sensors. So, we've got the CTM01. This one is a thermal one, temperature sensing. We've got little LED on. We've got the pass-through to the next sensor and your standard servo plug. Then we've got a CVT01, and this is voltage. So we've got positive, negative, again, LED and pass-through, and a servo plug. We have CPD02, and this one is an optical RPM sensor. Again, LED, pass-through port for the next sensor, servo plug, and this one comes with some reflective tape, so every time this passes this sensor, picks it up and classes it as a rotation. And then finally for this lot, we've got the CPD01. This one has a magnetic sensor, comes with two tiny little magnets, and basically every time a magnet passes this, it classes it as a rotation, so you can measure RPM that way. Now, as for receivers, so you're going to need one that'll bind in two-way. So we have the FSR7P, and this has got the sense and servo on the actual receiver itself. Then you've also got the FSR11P, and again we can see the port for sense and servo. Then we've got the flight versions. So these you'll get slightly longer range, but they will bind to the G11P. And again, you've got the servo and sense inputs. So you can quite easily tell if you don't have any of the servo or sense input on your receiver, the chances are it's not compatible. I believe the gyro receiver can also do two-way. But unfortunately I've lost where I put it. But it'll set up exactly the same way as these. So if we take any of these, so first off we're going to have to provide it with power. So let's bring on a motor and ESC, and we'll have that in channel 2. So we got that connected. We'll take our first sensor. So we'll run this as a voltage one. So we're going to plug that into the sense port. And then we've got our cable that we want to measure voltage. Now you can measure the LiPo that you're running the RC off, or on this one, I'll use as an example, we've got a separate LiPo. So all you want to do is connect the negative and the positive, and that'll give us something to measure. So then we're going to need a servo for a steering, so that'll just go as normal into channel 1. So that's how we've got it set up. So we've got a servo in channel 1, we've got as ESC in channel 2, and then into the sense port we've got our first sensor, and then we've just got it connected positive and negative to a battery. So if we power up with our bind button held, we get a constant flashing light, and if you look on the sensor we just get a flashing light. So we're not detecting anything yet, we're not configured. On as transmitter, you want to go in, select your model, so just set blank one, and then you can name it if you want, but I'm not going to bother on this one. So as normal, I'd go and set the failsafe. I'd just set mine to no output. Then in as bind, we're going to bind routine, we're going to bind two-way. It's important, it's got to be a two-way communication. RX type is standard. We're going to want PWM and iBus. set my servo to digital because I know this servo can handle it, and then set as bind.
Binding successful.
Now as soon as it's bound, you get a solid light on the actual receiver, you get a solid light on your little telemetry sensor. So if we just back out, so quickly we've got our steering, we've got as throttle, brake and reverse. So now we need to get as sensors. So if we go in here and we come across the sensor, we can display them. So you can see we've got as external voltage being measured at 7.5 volt. If you didn't want to measure your external one, if you wanted to measure the actual LiPo that you're powering the RC off, so we can come down to this, we can go positive and negative, and then you can see we're getting 10.8 volt. That's the pack that we're actually running all the speed controller and everything off. You can measure up to 100 volt and you can measure up to negative 100 volt. So on these sensors, they really don't care. You can plug them directly, whether you're running 8S, 6S, whatever, they really won't care, they'll measure it. So that is how we connect this first sensor up. Then we can come into set sensors, so we can swap all these. We can have them all reading whatever we want. So if we come into this one, we can come down and they usually appear at bottom. So we go to as external. Now you can have an alarm on if you want. So if you wanted to measure and you wanted an alert when the battery's going flat. So this is a 3S. So we'll set as maximum to 14 volt. And then if I want it to alert me at 3.3 volt per cell, I can do that. Because the RX reading we get in here is the BEC, not the actual pack. So we can have that on. If as voltage does go low, which I can simulate by just unplugging the sensor. So then it goes red and we'll get a beep every now and again to say it's going flat. And if I plug it back in, so we know we've got an okay voltage, what we're happy with, and it'll stay on. But next thing, what if we want to add more sensors? So if we want to add a temperature sensor, we can get as temperature sensor. You can go to the end of the last sensor you've got plugged in and we can connect another sensor. So they just daisy chain, and somewhere in the back of my mind I think it's a limit of 12. I might be wrong. I know it used to be something around there, but you're not really going to want that many sensors. So on this one, if we come into a sensor panel again, we can display them. We're now getting the temperature. So we can go to set sensors, and if you don't want one of these on, you can take it off. You can just change it. So we'll change that one to a temp. So if we turn that on and say we want to monitor the temperature as motor, and you can set this to whatever you like. Let's say look what maximum is. It's quite high on these. So yeah, we're already well above anything that we'd want to measure. So if I set this just a bit above what its current temperature is, so if for example we didn't want its motor to reach over 100, we'd set that to 100. I'm going to set it to 28 just because I can trigger this, but we've got the temperature reading on the screen. So we can have as temperature sensor. So if you're using your motor, you can fasten this to the actual motor itself and it will read the temperature. You can get some little bands, you can get some thermal paste, you can get thermal pads, any way you want. So if you wanted a little thin thermal pad, and then you could sort of sandwich this between, fasten a zip tie around it and get your motor temp. But if you imagine we're running and this is measuring as motor temp and we've got his alarm set to 100, if I hold the sensor, you can see we quickly get up and into the 28 degree above what I've got set as the alarm, and then as it cools back down, see we get the beep. Let's see if I can get this down below 28 degrees. And there you go. As soon as it gets below 28 degrees, it'll stop alerting. And then if I hold it again, you can see how quickly it'll do it. And it'll beep if it stays above. And then if I touch it on motor so it cools it back down. And the second it goes below, that's it, we're back to normal. So again, if you want to add another sensor to it, so if we take another sensor, this one's the optical RPM, and we plug this in, go to display sensors, we can see it's there, and I'll do my best to get this to trigger. So you see, every time it goes past, it'll measure an RPM, and if I speed it up, it'll speed up. If I slow it down, it'll slow right down. Not the most accurate, waving the reflective thing past it, it does trigger it all over the place. And then finally, if we want to plug another in, we can then plug yet another sensor in. This is the magnetic RPM. So if I get as little magnets and I wave them past it, you can see it does detect it. Again, not the most accurate, it'll sensor all over the place waving things past it, but you get the general idea. So we can just keep adding sensors. Likewise on these, you can then add them to this screen if you want. So we've got all the other RPM sensors. You've also got alarms you can set for max and min RPM. And we've got more reading out on the screen, and you can change these about as much as you like. So from the main screen, if you just hit down, you'll see all your sensor panels. And basically, this is the same way that we add these for all of these receivers. You just bind, make sure you've got it connected to the sense port, and then they just daisy chain off there. There is another sensor, which is the GPS. So let's find the end of this spaghetti mess. So if we plug this one in, this is the FLYSKY GPS01. So if we come off and we go into sensors, display sensors, and then you can see we're getting speed from the GPS, distance covered. It does distance from where it starts, and then the altitude. So there is a lot more to it. Obviously it's got to get satellite link, so not the best to do this indoors, but you can change your time zone and everything, and you can reset its starting point. But there is a lot more to the GPS and setting it up, and we can have stuff on here as well. So if we go, we can have as altitude, distance, or velocity. And again, you can set alarms for these. So as you see, it'll pick it up. It needs to get its satellite locks, and this has also got a pass-through port on. So that's a whole load of sensors, and that's how we get them set up and working. It's how you configure them, and then you get to deal with loads of wires. But it can come in handy if you need to spread the sensors around the RCs, because they all daisy chain. So everyone doesn't have to come back to the actual receiver. But yeah, that's just a whole bunch of sensors and the G11P, just to give you some idea of what it can read, how to set it up, and it is just a case of keep plugging them in. It will work the same on every one of the receivers. You've just got to remember you have to make them binding two-way. So if we just come back to the setup screen for binding, you have to make sure it's two-way. You want PWM and iBus enabled, and then set your servos and then press start, and that's it. Have fun with loads of different sensors on the G11P. But let's wrap this one up. So there you have it, the G11P and how to bind up and set up sensors. Just remember it has to be one of the two-way receivers, and it has to have the sense port on it for this to work. I believe that the gyro one is also a two-way, so that may work. I've got to find it out and try it. But certainly all the ones, the four that I've listed there, all bind straight to this transmitter, set them up the same way, and you'll have telemetry working on them all. You can also have the BVD port as well, so you can use that as well as the other sensors. So if you've got multiple batteries that you want to monitor, you could have one on the BVD and one on the voltage sensor. But yeah, thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.